Hello, everyone, and welcome to this series on Know Your Community. Today, we have a fantastic person who we are going to meet, and he's got a beautiful business which will benefit many. Hello, Delio. Great to have you.
Thank you, Judith. It's lovely to be here. So my name's Delio Nobrega, as you said. I have been in Australia for 3 years. I'm originally Portuguese, but I lived in the UK for about 35 years, and there's kind of where I learned my trade. I'm a data consultant, stroke data engineer. So basically, I try and help businesses leverage their data and maximize as much as possible any competitive edge they might have, and usually entails around cost savings or improvements or even automations.
Wonderful, right? So, about you, how did data find you, or how did you found data?
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't start out as being a data consultant. I don't even think many people do. My background is software engineering. So I went to university a long time ago and studied software engineering. I was coding and the principles around it and methodologies. And I suppose I was trained kind of old school, how to design things on paper, and as a last resort, then go into the coding itself. And that's kind of served me well over the years. I ended up creating my own company and mentoring other people as well, other trainees. And one thing I kind of found as I was using and creating a system, every system needs data. And a lot of the clients that I was working for and creating systems for, they had a big need for always reporting and analysis. And I found I had a bit of a flair and I liked it. I always had an inquisitive mind and I like new problems and hopefully trying to solve them.
What you do actually fascinates me, right? So, the pull towards the data that you have and the outcomes that you get for the clients, they are really, really good. And what the case study that you told me about the postal service that
Oh
that
yeah,
you were a part of. That was really fantastic.
projects that I get involved with that require a lot of data analysis in the past have been for global banks or financial institutions, people that have a lot of data and a lot of need. Where the post office didn't have a lot of data, they were just in early phases of it. And it was completely different. They had a logistics business as well and the postal, so letters. And it was, they had a problem. And the problem was they had to prove the price of a stamp. And the reason why they had to do it is they had a agreement with the UK provider Royal Mail. In other words, a little line called Jersey, which is actually where I lived. They, in order to send post out to the rest of the world, it has to go through the UK. So they have to essentially prove to the UK this is how many letters go through our system, and ultimately this is how much it costs. So it became like a time and motion project and to begin with. And I recall distinctly going in with a colleague of mine around 3:30 in the morning, seeing the post arrive from the airplane, being unpacked, and going through the various sorting mechanisms and the OCR as well, optical character recognition, and eventually landing on the postie pigeon box, as they're called, and sorting out into various postcodes and locations. And it was fascinating. It really was, because it was completely different. And it wasn't just data. It was, they wanted us to try and prove it. So to prove it, I had to work out how much time is being spent, how much by each individual, how much letters or different types of letters are going through each process. So it became like a work stream analysis across every single one of those. And in order to try and capture this without detrimental impact on the actual process itself, we had to be a little bit clever about it, to do things in a way. And it required a lot of sampling, a lot of data sampling. So every week there was various samples created and taken. And what that meant was they had a plastic box, essentially container, and X amount of letters could fit in there. So when it was full, it's 100%. So what we did, they had percentages markers across the container itself. And as the letters arrived, they stuck it in there and using a scanner, 100%. 50%, 60%. And that was automatically captured wirelessly into the central hub, the central system. And later that was analyzed, and we integrated as well with the actual OCR machines, so found how much success was being taken by the optical character recognition and where it was going to. And we also worked out how long each letter was being driven through each workflow, essentially a work stream, which was fascinating. And ultimately what it ended up being, what we had to accumulate as well and combine HR, payroll, as well as premises, and eventually help guide the client to the ultimate solution, or being, well, actually, this is how much it costs you, and this is how much letters going through your system. Therefore, per week, per day, this is what you actually should be charging if you want to break even. And yeah, it was amazing, really. And it's not, yes, I'm proud of doing it, but it was just something that was just so interesting because it was completely different to analyzing money, essentially, and transactions, ultimately.
So be it money or a non-money, as you say, it's data, and you analyze it and you give the outcome that is needed for the clients. And what you do is really fascinating. So what got you into data-driven solutions? So how did you navigate to that?
I was running a data team in UK, and my wife and I came to Australia a few years ago, and we loved it, and we decided to emigrate here. But my company I was leading or running over there didn't want to lose me, and they essentially gave me a solution and said, well, why don't you create your own company over there and we'll outsource you. So I did that. It was just too good to miss out an opportunity. So hence data-driven solutions was created over here, where in UK I was mainly consulting, and eventually became a permanent member of staff running a team over there of data engineers, really. So yeah, that's kind of how I started. And I'm currently, I've kind of been a little bit, I say lazy, but been very busy in the UK and still settling in to a certain extent. So now I'm actually looking at obtaining new clients and trying to extend my presence in Australia by making people aware of what's possible and what I can do. And yeah, let's watch this space.
As data-driven solutions, what are the services that you believe we can add to the Australian market?
I think Australia is kind of in infancy regarding regulatory events. In Europe and UK, it's highly regulated when it comes to data. And I don't know if you heard of GDPR. And essentially what that meant was that the whole data world had to change. And now solutions are being created, or systems are being created from scratch with that whole GDPR mentality built in. So in order to do that created a change in how we thought, how we designed. And essentially GDPR pretty much means that you cannot hold information outside of the realm of actually requiring it to. And if you do, you need to have a good reason, or you might get fined by the regulator itself. And you as an individual as well, if you're a customer, you have the right to be forgotten, for example. So you can ask a supplier that's providing you services, if you want to leave, you ask them, please remove all my details from your system, and they have to abide by that. And there are caveats to that. If they, for example, have data that belongs to another jurisdiction, which has got an overriding destruction requirements, then okay, that they won't. Or beyond reasonable reuse. So, for example, if the data is being stored on a backup tape or disk somewhere, it's not reasonable to ask the client to go and delete that from backup. So anyway, the whole data still around regulatory is changed the sphere in UK and Britain for quite a while. And I think Australia is just a matter of time. That level of regulation will happen. The rest of the world is going with it. I think in South Africa there's Poppy, which is similar, but GDPR takes it to the next level. And even the likes of FATCA regulatory events, I've done a lot of automations around providing data to essentially the US government around what holdings people have in the various client systems. And usually providing that data, it involves a lot of heroics by internal staff because there's so many systems and so much data to bring on board, especially for the likes of enterprise, even mid-sized clients. And that's something that I've done a few times, and they're usually very thankful of the automation that takes place because they spend so much time and so much effort ensuring the data is right. And the solutions that I try to implement in place make them a bit more proactive. So it captures data, for example, every day on what's going on across the world in various products and balances. And so rather than actually getting to 3 months before the deadline and panicking into getting all this information, they're ahead of the game. The data quality has already been improved because they've been collecting it, correcting it as they go by. Various business owners have been empowered to actually correct the data because it's their data. And that does require, by the way, a culture shift change, and it has to come from the top down. So to truly be a data-driven organization, you have to have that mentality of actually, it's your data, it's your system. You see something wrong, you go and fix it. Don't leave it tomorrow. Don't let someone else, this is your role, you noticed it, go and fix it. And it is challenging, but with the right data governance and data quality support and facilitation, I suppose. I mean, I see these as gaps and opportunities to automate, to integrate, but ultimately the data belongs to the business, it belongs to the data owner. And we as data engineers and consultants kind of help them through that journey and try to make them realize the impact of correcting the data at source, for example. And there are always challenges, and sometimes there's more priorities. And when that happens, I usually suggest having a data debt register. So, okay, yes, we've seen it, we've spotted it. Now let's record it and put a deadline on when we're going to fix it and who's going to be responsible for it, and ultimately go out and make sure that actually takes place. And that's usually done by the data governance people with our assistants in the data engineering world. So yeah, it's a very interesting subject, and I love it, and I'm passionate about it. And there's so many facets to it as well.
Would you be able to share the type of solutions that you found that actually surprised you?
Yeah, I suppose the biggest thing to kind of understand, I suppose, is that no one or no organization data is perfect, and by a big margin. And we look at banks and we think, okay, they've got these amazing products and this amazing mobile app and amazing systems, and they must have amazing data, but ultimately they don't. New banks sometimes do online presence, but they're very small, and because they start from scratch, they have that luxury of doing so, of designing things properly from scratch. But ultimately, big organizations like that are quite old. They've been around for a long time, and they have lots of systems. And obviously, as soon as you get different people coming in and different CEOs and different priorities, things change. So the data itself isn't necessarily that great. And that's kind of where we try and come in and try and integrate these systems together, create the likes of a single customer view, which is an interesting concept because although banks have lots of systems, and using banking as an example, because I know them quite well, or even bigger financial institutions, they've got loads of offshore or multiple jurisdictions. They have lots of systems and lots of data jolted around, but really what they want is something central, and to be able to, one, analyze it, do some trending on it, and do some predictions and forecasting. You can't forecast in isolation, so especially the likes of CFOs, they love to have access to the data, and that's always been the biggest gripe. They love Excel, and then we're never going to get them away from Excel. And I love Excel as well, to be fair. And I try and provide the data to them in a structured format that, one, is easier for them to use in whatever tool they choose, whether it's Excel, could be Word. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as they're used to it and know it well. You can actually see the user going, wow, you just saved me lots and lots of time. And ultimately, time is money. And one of the reasons, I suppose, I called the company Data-Driven Solutions is because that is something that I tend to like to do and encourage clients to install or put a system in place to essentially try and be more proactive. Not only use the data, because everyone has data and everyone has reports. That's a given in this day and age. However, having these reports doesn't mean people actually go and view them. It means you want them to, and it's part of their job. But in today's society, there's different priorities, and who in their job role has only got one task to view their report? It's not going to happen. You've got loads and loads of facets. So things get missed, and it could be 2 weeks, it could be a month, it could be a lot of time before actually you start noticing. And as well, in order to interpret these reports, you have to have a certain level of business knowledge. So with that in mind, I thought, okay, well, let's try and obtain some of that knowledge and bring it down a level so anyone could actually interpret the data in the same way you are. So I put in place some rules underneath the hood and some data engineering rules to say, if data events that match this criteria take place, imagine a client deposits, I don't know, $1 million, let's say, in a bank account, and it just sits there. It's a current account. It sits there for 3 months. It's kind of up to salespeople and operations people to look at this data, not necessarily who it is, but the data is there. We have a client with a lot of money sitting there for 3 months, not earning any interest. It could be making us money, but most importantly, we can make a client money, and the client be happy. So you create these types, I call it data-driven alerts, where the various teams get notified. Actually, we've got a big list of targets for you to actually go and talk to and see if they want to move their money into a more higher performing account, or even do something different. An example being, or another example, passport's going to expire in 3 months. We have to do some KYC. Right, okay. An alert is generated, and that alert essentially becomes your task. It's your workflow. And that's kind of what I try to do. I try to simplify it as much as possible, but still making it as easy for the user or users. It doesn't, and that's the other thing, it doesn't have to go to one individual, because obviously then becomes a key man. So I use emailing with something called event grids, notifications, and it goes out to these individuals or group of a team. Now, security is obviously quite paramount, but security teams are usually focused primarily on keeping the perimeter safe, not letting data go out. But realistically, the biggest threat for any organization is its staff, its internal members. And, they don't usually have the time to do this on a daily basis. So again, they'll review permissions, let's say every 3 months. And once we identified who the data owner of a database or a system, a file, anything is, they would go back to that owner and ask them to attestate to make sure these people got permissions to the systems are valid to do so. And most of the times it's fine. However, there are occasions where someone's not been tidied up, in other words, someone's left, or they've moved, most importantly, moved to a different department. And because they've moved to that different department, they no longer have the right to see this data, because it could be a different client. A client, from a GDPR perspective, they no longer should be looking at. So Chinese walls, essentially. And they then review it and obviously tell the security team. But if you think of it from a logistics perspective, 3 months have gone by. We could have had that issue for 3 months. Okay, so again, using the same concept, data-driven alerts, you can put in place these types of mechanisms. As soon as data is established in it's actually Active Directory, so the whole Active Directory forest on the domain establishes this person has moved role, whether it means integrating the HR system or just purely AD. An alert could be generated to a security team, or even if they have a help desk, in other words, possibly some of those tasks are delegated, then it goes to them to action. And as soon as that becomes an alert, instantly you're creating a KPI. You are creating a metric that someone could be essentially assessed on. You've had that in your queue for 2 weeks, you haven't done anything about it. Why not? It's a security breach. You should be asking about, those type of conversations can be had. I'm sure we won't get to that stage, but the point is, it empowers them to go off and do it, and empowers management to be more proactive rather than actually reactive. And I think 3 months, despite this being quite a big organization, was a long time. And they happily admitted it's too long. We need something quicker. And that's kind of what I've tried to do. And it's worked really well. Yeah.
As someone who is external looking into it, I see that you're someone who is looking at the organization's data and making it work for them, instead of that being, an overhead or something.
Absolutely.
You have this beautiful data, and let me do what I can to make it work for you. So is that?
Yes. It's exactly it. And I guess I'm going to get a little bit of a soapbox now, because I love data, and the reason why I love data is because of my path. I was a software engineer. I went to university. I actually studied metrics at university as well, because metrics in the software engineering was vital. So I've got a good math and good statistics background. And it led me to this path. So this whole journey of becoming a software engineer, as in creating products, finding requirements, working with business process engineering as well, and then owning my own business. So I became a project manager as well on the side. I became a network engineer, and all this accumulation of knowledge to ultimately run my own company has given me quite a big breadth of knowledge. And I see that level of framework, I suppose, or grounding, as paramount to anyone working in the data engineering sphere, because you can get a data engineering qualification online, and someone at university, okay, I'm a data scientist. Okay, yes, you are. But ultimately, knowing how internal systems, how business work, how people work, how processes can be designed and automated, makes that person a much better data engineer, in my opinion. And I know
it's experience, isn't it?
It's experience. It's knowing when to hit that little hammer, and that again, that's where my love for data comes in, with the whole automation. So I'm not just giving data in a presentable, robust, framework or design for other people to use, whether it's BI people, Power BI, or even analytics, or even data scientists itself. A data scientist exists on top of data engineering principles. AI cannot exist without some decent data, without decent data engineers. And actually, I was thinking quite recently, and data engineering is the biggest growing job role in the world right now in the IT, which is good and also scary, because I think it means there's a lot more people going into it that not necessarily going in for the right reasons, or should be, or very new into it. I'm sure eventually there might be, but unless you've had that whole grounding from the framework to delivery to design to planning to knowing how all these systems integrate, all you'll be focusing on is some patterns on data. And although that is good from a data perspective, but I find that having that whole holistic experience adds a lot more value for a client. So you don't just go into, okay, I looked at your data. Yes, you do have a problem. Yes, here's a solution. I can actually go in, actually, you've got some more data here. What if you did this? What if you streamlined that? Rather than going from A to B to C, why can't we just go to C? and that's bringing in some business process engineering and using my software development head, which you can't get rid of. It's there. And yeah, that's what I think my niche is and my unique selling point.
And that's beautiful, isn't it? And what you do for clients is so valuable. You're using their own data to make it work for them, and what you can do for them and take them to the next steps. So how can clients contact you?
On LinkedIn, there's only one with my name, Dalia Nobrega. So yeah, just get in touch there and you can request a meeting, and I'll be happy to have a chat and see whether I can actually help you.
I'm delighted to have you here, and it's a beautiful thing you do, and ERP community appreciates what you do and the value you bring in, especially where we have loads and loads of data that we have no idea how we're going to work with, but I'm sure you can help. Thank you for your time today.
Great. Thank you for having me. It's been lovely. Thank you.